Hello everyone who associates gigantic artillery pieces with bread, sandwiches and cake, and also Tetris. I am BorderWise, and welcome back to From the Depths CRAM tutorials. This is class 102. I guess this is a class now. So if you haven't seen CRAM tutorial 101, which is the overview of all the different bits of CRAM cannons, you should go watch that first, because I can't, well, repeat myself every single time. This video is probably going to be long enough as it is. Now, today, we're doing Tetris. And the first question that pops up is, what the hell is Tetris? Well, From the Depths is a game based around blocks, more specifically cubes. With any cube, it has 6 sides to it. And, specifically for CRAM cannons, pellets are 6-sided little things, and they can connect to packers on any one of those 6 sides. And why is this important? Why is this relevant? Well, these things are expensive. So, they're not the most expensive weapon system in the game. That would probably be particle cannons, in which 1 meter of particle cannon tubing is 200 materials. CRAMs aren't quite that bad because they're not made entirely of pellets, but still, pellets are pricey. All of them are 180 materials, just little 1 by 1 by 1 meter blocks, except for hardened pellets, which are very slightly cheaper at 150. So, what does this mean? You do not want to use any more of these than you actually have to. You want to maximize the amount of connectors you have so you don't blow your budget. Whether you're playing the campaign or adventure mode, and especially if you're entering something in a tournament, which often have very strict material limits on the craft you can use, you really don't want to build inefficiently. Maximizing your connections and maximizing the material efficiency of your Tetris, along with other things, is how you do that. So, to start off with, you'll notice we've got a whole bunch of CRAM turrets here. Each single one of these is a different size, or has different Tetris. There's a lot of different Tetrises, as it turns out, and people, I don't know, I probably even haven't discovered them all, but some of them are kind of better than others because smart people have done the math. Now, let us get rid of the Marauders over there and start with this fella over here. Those of you with good memories would remember this particular little fella as being, well, basically identical to the CRAM cannon I made in the last few minutes of CRAM Cannons 101. And I said then it was bad. I didn't explain why. Here's why it is bad. It has got bad Tetris. You've got 6 sides on this cube of HE pellets, but only 2 of them are being used for any one pellet. Which means this CRAM cannon has to use more of them, and they're very expensive. So, there are some stats to go by here. Bearing in mind, what we're dealing with here is the ratio between materials spent per firepower gained and volume per firepower gained. Those are the 2 things we tend to focus on when building CRAM cannons. Bear in mind, the firepower stat, which you can find right here, is very misleading. Or at least it can be misleading. It only gives a rough idea of how much ducka any particular weapon has, because depending on the weapon system, it can be better or worse depending on what kind of thing it is shooting at, what kind of material it's shooting at, and in particular for CRAM cannons, the shell velocity, the distance, and the shell health, and all that kind of thing. So this is very basic, very rough, so bear that in mind, but it is quite handy for telling whether your CRAM is material efficient. Immediately we can tell that this is horrible. You want this number to be as low as possible, with pretty much anything From the Depths, but in particular CRAM cannons, because there is something you can do about it just by the way you build it. 857.3 materials for every 1 firepower is horrendously bad. So, I have collated all the things here. Bad 3x3 2D Tetris, don't do this. 2 connections of the pellets is very material inefficient. That's only 2 out of 6 possible that we could use. And because of the way this is set up, it's only pellets, there's no compactors, it actually fires too quickly. A fast fire rate on a CRAM is generally not helpful, as the shells have too little health to get through active defenses. The health on these shells is only 810, and as I've said here, laser anti-munition defenses will eat this absolutely no problem. If you shoot at anything with any kind of active defense, these shells are not going to get through. And the sweet spot to aim for the reload time, or the pack-in time rather, is between between 10 to 25 seconds for smaller and larger crams respectively. 6.91 seconds is absolutely too fast. If you want a fast-firing gun, that is when you head over to the advanced cannon section. That is what they are good at. High velocity, high fire rate. Cram cannons are where you fire slowly, but for maximum kaboom per shell. Now, how do we do better Tetris than this? Because this is actually the first Tetris I ever witnessed in From the Depths, way back in the day. But we can do a lot better. But to start with the Tetris, you need to understand the cross/diamond. It all starts with this basic little shape here, which is a connector and 4 payload pactors surrounding it. This, one way or another, is going to show up in pretty much every kind of Tetris you could probably think of, even the funky ones in which there's just squeezed into a corner like this. You're going to see the cross, the cram cross, the hot cross cram, so to speak. I'm going to be using a lot of baking analogies, or at very least culinary analogies here. And if I make you hungry, I apologize. I've already made myself hungry. Now, moving right along. What we have here is kind of sort of the, well, something better. This is 3x3 2D Tetris. This is 2D Tetris, but it's bad. This is slightly better. It is the best I could do while still keeping things 2D. Even then, not entirely 2D. So this little fella, right here, is a 1000mm cram. And I just realized I did something different here. I did many things differently here. Actually, this is actually one of the smallest crams on here. There's only 2 of them, which are minimum gauge. This is one of them. Why is that? Well, you'll notice the reload speed is just over 20 seconds. With all of these crams, I've tried to hit that sweet spot of roughly 20 seconds, except for this one, because it's a bad example. This guy didn't need gauge increases for that. Why is that? Well, if we have a look at the Tetris, both in this turret itself and over here, you'll see that I have tried to, instead of using pellets here, use packers. This is better than what you've seen before, but then again, I don't know, like sneezing at enemies upside down is probably better than using that cram cannon. So yeah, basically the rough rule of thumb is you want to stick your pellets at the very minimum. Like, we're talking you're desperate for more pellets here in a 3x3, because at the very least you're using it at half capacity. Again, preferably more than that. The ones here are using 4. And this is still Diamond Tetris, it's just asymmetric, and it's kind of shunted to the side and forwards a little bit. Now, this is not a great cram cannon. It is the best you can probably do in a 3x3 space. And part of the problem is, you'll notice something with compactors as compared to gauges. Compactors are more than twice as expensive, so you don't actually want to use these more than you have to. You do want to use more compactors. No, that's a lie. You don't want to overdo the pellets, but you also don't want to overdo the compactors, because it is cheaper to get more packing into your cram cannon by using gauge increases, by making the gun bigger. There are advantages to keeping your gauge smaller, but we'll get to that in a second. So let's look at the stats for this thing. So, gauge 1000mm, because it relies on compactors rather than the gauge. Not great. There is a little bit of 3D Tetris at the top. So this is where you start to think, hang on, how can I squeeze the maximum out there? Because this guy, this little packet right here is connected to something horizontally and vertically. This is where 3D Tetris begins. Now, HE damage per cell is over 10,000. That's actually pretty decent. Reload speed, decent as well. Shell health is 1,500, which is better than that thing over there, 810. But do bear in mind, this is just HE pellets with 1 fuse. Using fuses, as you can tell by the UI there, does reduce the health of your shell a little bit, so you can't go completely nuts on them. And what else? The material cost of the holocram is pretty cheap, and the material per firepower is 548.3, which is better than this, which has, again, I remind you, where is it? 857.3. So this is like, not quite twice as good. More like a third as good, maybe. My math is not great. But the volume per firepower is 16.28, whereas this is 10.29, which is, I don't know. It's not bad, but it's not good. We can do better. This thing, volume efficiency is even worse than that fellow over there. Now, how do we actually do a good job? Well, 2D Tetris does a little bit better once you get beyond 3x3. By the way, from 5x5 width and length, it's basically the same Tetris all the way down. It only really changes from 3 to 3, and then you go one step up, and then it's bigger. So, this fella is 5x5 2D Tetris, and this is where things actually start to get a little bit more sane, a little bit more reasonable. You'll notice we've got the CRAM diamond here. It's like 4 CRAM crosses, but they're kind of meeting in the middle. So we've got 5 explosive pellets in this layer. Each one of them has 4 connections, which is acceptable. Not great, but acceptable. It's got gauge increases going up the side because, well, they can fit there. By the way, armor turrets, good idea, not always 100% essential, but if you are going to compromise the armor, you start from the back. Don't do it from the front, that's silly. So yeah, let's have a look at what's in here. Again, there is a smidge of 3D Tetris at the top. Some of the packers are turned sideways, so they can connect to compactors above them, while still being connected to pellets to the side of them, and that is handy dandy. And you'll see that all the layers are the same. So we've got a layer here, we've got just explosive pellet, explosive pellet, explosive pellets surrounded by packers, and you go up, and that's all the same. That is one of the great advantages of 2D Tetris, is that it's pretty easy to do. Once you know how to do it, it's just really easy just to duplicate that layer, and away you go. But how's the stats? So HE damage per shell is about 32,000, gauge is max gauge, and the trick is you use the gauge, well, you can do it either way really, but generally, because the gauges come last, and the compactors go first, use the gauge to fine-tune the packing rate after all 1 and 2 connection points are filled with compactors, as a general rule, not a hard and fast rule. And you only want to use connectors in 3 to 6 connection points if you really, really need to in order to get the desired packing fire rate, because those are slots that are probably better off for using pellets instead. So, HE damage per cell is around 32,000 as opposed to this, so it does 3 times as much damage per shot, bearing in mind it is bigger. Reload time, just over 20 seconds. Shell health is 5,000 something, which is a lot better than this. CRAMs get much better as they get bigger. Material cost is a little bit more expensive, like a lot more. This is the problem with 2D CRAM, it's pricey. And the material per firepower is better. It's 442.4 materials for 1 firepower. We're getting there, still not excellent, and the volume for firepower is much better. So from 16.28 to 10.57. Very nice indeed. And just to show you I'm not just making these up, I didn't need to put notes on all of these, I just realized that was dumb. Anyway, so that's 2D Tetris, which you use if you're in a hurry, or if you haven't quite gotten the hang of 3D Tetris yet. Now we move on to the magical land of 3D Tetris. This is what I like to call, well, if you think of 2D Tetris as a pancake, just stacked on top of each other endlessly, for a delicious grand slam, this, I guess you could call the berry loaf, because it's just a loaf stuffed with, well, explosive berries in this case. So, what the hell are we looking at here? This is the 3x3 3D Tetris. I've started to call it Rotational Tetris, or 3D 3-way, and the reason I call it Rotational Tetris is, well, you'll see in a bit. If we look in here, if we have a squiz in here, you'll notice that there's this kind of, the cross still is in here, it's just a little bit different. Rather than the packers being connected essentially from behind, bearing in mind that behind in this case is that peg on the bottom of this little guy, it's connecting instead of from behind, from what is its bottom. Like, I consider this, well, technically the bottom's like that, but I consider the bottom like that thing right there. So it's kind of 2D Tetris, but flipped vertical, and then arranged a little bit differently. So you'll see in here there's this kind of cross of connectors, but you go one layer up, the cross is turned 90 degrees. That's why I call this Rotational Tetris. Because once you have a 3x3 prefab, what you do here is check the instructions, take the 3x3 prefab, step up 2, rotate once, place, repeat. So, just to show you what we're talking about, you've got this kind of cross in here, you've got all these packers facing in, so they're connecting above, below, and to the side. Same down here on the bottom, whenever possible, and with the connector there, they're attached like so. The pointy bits are always pointing at a pellet. So if we prefab this, Control P for prefab, width, height, thing. So here, and what does this say? It says, step up 2, rotate once, place. So, Here, 1, 2, rotate once, and place. Step up, 2, 1, 2, rotate, place. And hopefully you'll see, whoops, I didn't do that right. So, rotate once, 1, 2, rotate once. There we go. There, I did it right. So now you've got this repeating pattern. So every 2, the packer's on the other side, and the explosive pellets are rotated. So if you've done this correctly, pretty much every pellet should be connected to either 3, this one's 3 on top, or 4. What the hell? Okay. There, I did that wrong. This is why you gotta double check your Tetris a lot. Because if you don't, it's embarrassing. There we go. The stats on that are probably stuffed as well because I did that. Whee! Okay. There we go. That's looking good. So, what are the stats of this thing? Remember, we're comparing this to this fella over here, which is using the same volume. So, let's have a look-see. So the gauge, 2,000mm, HE damage per shell is 21,000 or so. Which is twice the damage of that. The reload time is roughly the same. Shell health is over 3,000, twice as good as this 2D thing. And material cost is 4,700. It's more expensive than 2D 3x3, but much more powerful. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Alright, so yeah, this cost is... where is it? Material cost is 2,695. This is a lot more expensive, but this is much more powerful. It's making better use of the pellets. The material per firepower is 451.7, which is not as good as the 5x5 2D, but this is still a smaller and cheaper system, and it is definitely better than the over 500 material per firepower over here. And the volume per firepower is very good indeed. It's 9.61, which is way better than the 16.28 over here, and it is better than the 5x5 2D Tetris. Now, that is our rotational Tetris, and beyond a 3x3 space, this stops being very helpful. There's diminishing returns, which I will show you in a minute. Here is where things get quite funky. This is 6-connection Tetris. Actually, these two forms of Tetris, these two actually use the same kind, it's just arranged differently. This is prioritizing 6-way connections on the pellets, and this is prioritizing 5 connections. There is a reason for why you'd want to drop 1. Now, what is the deal with this fella? If we look inside, you'll see that this is alternating layers. This is basically what I like to call the stacked sandwich, because it is kind of like layers in a sandwich. Like, you know them Scooby-Doo sandwiches, which have just got a hell of a lot of layers between them? It's kind of like that. So, if we zoom out here, you'll see that aside from these bonus little pellets on the front, which have only 3 connections, boo, these things in the middle have 6. And they manage 6 because they are completely surrounded by payload packers. This is very efficient. It basically means you get, you need to use 6 times fewer pellets in order to get the same amount of kaboom, at least in theory. And over the top here, we have like just compactors and extra stuff here. This took a while for me to learn, but again, once you get the hang of it, it just kind of flows naturally. It is more time consuming than 2D, which is why sometimes when I'm lazy, I will make a 2D CRAM just for giggles. Now, there's 2 different layers to use here. So the layer 1 is connectors, it is packers, and it's compactors, and this should sandwich the 4 connector layers between them, starting from the top and bottom. So I tend to build connectors from the rear of the system or the turret, hoping they might get shot less. You'll see here that the connectors are kind of starting from the back and marching forward, ensuring that all the packers are connected to them. Always double check your Tetris to make sure things are connected as they should be, and there's a handy option in the UI for that. So you'll see highlighting options, warning highlights off. You can switch this to build mode, and when you do that, you'll see that all this glows red. It's going red because none of these CRAM components are attached to a firing piece, which means if you're doing your Tetris, you can do this. You can see what's attached and what isn't. We're going to turn that off for now because it is needlessly distracting if you're not actually building something. And this should look very familiar. This is exactly the same Tetris layer as our 5x5 friend over here. Well, almost. It doesn't have the gauge increases on the side. This goes and is sandwiched in between these layers like this. That is how you get these little pellets being nicely squished in between packers like that. It looks something like this. It's minimum layers of 3 in order to get this very material efficient kind of Tetris to actually work. So yeah, we got the bread, we got the filling, and we got more bread. Not to be confused with bread ball. That is a different thing entirely. And ta-da, 6 connection sandwich. So let's look at the stats of this thing as compared to this 5x5 2D thing over here. So, the gauge is 1600 millimeters, which is lower, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because smaller shells are less detectable by munition warmers. If you go here, you can see, where is it? So, diameter is 1600 meters, 317 meters detection range. It does have a flash suppressor on it as well. Compare that to this thing over here, 396 meters detection range. Little bit better. That few tens of meters could be the difference between the shell getting shot down or not. Now, what other stats does it have? HE damage per cell is over 30,000, which is about the same as this guy. Yeah, it's slightly less. It is a little bit less damage. Reload time is 25.7. On the smaller side of 6 connection systems, they tend to have quite a long reload time because they have a lot of compactors in them. So, also the disclaimer, this 6 connection Tetris is the way I do it, is the way I've learned how to do it, because people have variants on this, because 3D Tetris can be tweaked near endlessly, and it's possible to do this even more space efficiently if you add 3 to 4 connection pellets on the outside edge of the layers. I have in fact done this just to squeeze a little bit of extra juice out of this thing. Now, the shell health is just under 5,000, which is worse than this. But where this thing really gets kind of good is the cost. So, this thing is 5,000 materials, which is only 300-ish more materials more expensive than this thing, despite being about 50% larger. The volume of this 3x3 3D CRAM is... where's that volume? The volume is 100. The volume of this is 154. And yet, it's only a little bit more expensive. And the material cost of 5,000... compare that to over here. This is over 7,000. So, in using this CRAM, we're saving 2,000 materials, which means, well, this is very quick math done in my head, please excuse me. For every 2 of these things, we could have 3 of these. And that means redundancy. And redundancy is what we do for refundancy, because more guns, even though CRAM cannons do better, like with fewer, more powerful shells, that is handy. Our ship would be able to keep fighting even if multiple weapons are disabled, so that's good. That's why material efficiency is good. And the material per firepower is quite good. It's 388.3. If it's dropping below 400, that is a good sign. It is a hell of a lot better than this. Like, it's like noticeable. 60 less material per firepower. And the volume per firepower is unfortunately not as good. That is the weakness of going for 6 connections. But this scales up with size. So this 6 connection Tetris, the main advantage is that it's cheaper compared to everything else here. A little bit less volume efficiency and a little bit less denseness, I guess you could call it. But this scales up very well. It scales up better pretty much than any other kind of Tetris here. And speaking of the Tetris here, one last thing. This is a last-minute addition to this fortress, you can probably tell. I got in contact with my buddy Owelner, who is a CRAM veteran and has done a lot of crammage over the years, and I just got him to double-check this fortress and the other one I've got to make sure I haven't made any egregious errors. And he pointed out that there's another kind of 3D Tetris, which is essentially this. It is basically the same as this, except the meat of the sandwich is double layered. So, instead of just getting just alternating layers of 6 connections with connectors and packers and compactors between them, you have this interesting double layer of just 5 connections. Why the hell would you do this? Well, if we look over here, you'll see that there's a whole other layer here that's just making 5 extra connections in this particular setup. and of course the ones above it, but for as far as this pellet is concerned, it's one extra connection to the layer above it. For this case, in this pellet, there's 5 more connections in the layer straight above it, so this is way more volume efficient, and at this size, in this configuration, it's more material efficient as well. So this is kind of a pretty good compromise in between the volume efficiency of 2D Tetris and the material efficiency of 6 connection 3D Tetris. This is the 5 connection double stack sandwich. And thank you, Wellner, for showing me that. So again, 1600 meters, same gauge as this. We got to compare these two in particular. So HE damage per shell is over 30,000. It is slightly more than this one. The reload speed is slightly quicker as well, 24.29 versus 25.7. The shell health is a little bit better as well. The material cost is more expensive. It is definitely more expensive than 6 connections. So this is 5,219 versus just 5,000. So it's a little bit more pricey. The material per firepower is not as good, 374.1 versus 3... Actually, it is better. Hold on. Actually, yeah, that is better. Why the hell is... Alright, so it's more... Oh, wow, I misread my own notes. It's more expensive than 6 Nation Tetris, but it's still more material efficient, and it's more volume efficient as well. So we get a lovely 11.04 firepower per volume versus 11.95. So this is very slightly better at this scale. It's also easier to squish into weird turret configurations. So the problem with having a minimum of 3 layers for your turret is that 3 is a number that doesn't always comfortably fit into a bunch of other numbers. But this is essentially just, it doesn't matter which layer ends up on top, so you can have funky numbers like this. You can end with a bread layer, you can end with a filling layer, and or A and B, as people actually call them. I'm just weird and I like to relate things to food because I'm always hungry, apparently. So yeah, that is the stats of this. I will be showing this on the workshop, but we need to move on to something very important. We need to move on to bigger CRAM cannons. So I'm going to delete this thing, like so, and I'm going to move on to this. So these CRAMs are considerably bigger. So these are 13 by 13, or rather 11 by 11. It's 13 by 13 with the armor, much bigger, and they're all dual CRAM cannons. They have 2 firing pieces in the turret, as opposed to just 1. Now, there are pros and cons to doing this. One of the pros is that CRAM cannons can share pellets. So, if we look in here, shrink everything down, turn the UI back on, this connector right here is that CRAM cannon, or at least it belongs to the CRAM cannon that is on the right. This one over here is on the left, but both of these CRAM cannons are using this pellet. So basically, you are effectively using twice as many pellets because it's being shared by 2 CRAM cannons. In the old days of CRAM cannons, this was the key of Tetris, just sharing this between as many different CRAM cannons as possible, having as many firing pieces as possible, and then you can just unleash a huge CRAM barrage, and that's how it worked back then. It does not work like that now. The absolute limit, I would say, the sensible limit for how many firing pieces are on a single CRAM turret is 4. I have experimented with a lot more than that, infamously, like Future Me put up on screen like Krampus 2024. That was silly, that was fun. But the key with multi-firing piece CRAMs is very simple. Just make sure, well, it's comparatively simple. Just make sure that the connectors and the gauge increases do not touch each other. So in this particular case, you'll notice that none of the connectors are touching each other, and none of the gauge increases are really touching each other as well. And this is where the different kinds of gauge increases are very useful, because they all connect in slightly different ways. The basic one over here connects on all 6 sides. The gauge increase top also kind of connects on all 6 sides, but also not really. This one only connects on 3 sides. The corners are absolutely fantastic. They connect on 4, but there's 2 of them, which you essentially turn their back towards another CRAM, and it won't connect. And then we've got the port, which also connects on all 4 sides, and the pipe, which only connects on 2. So you'll see cunningly here, this gauge increase is attached to the CRAM on the left. However, it effectively has its back to this other CRAM, so it's not connecting. If this was something like this, we would have a problem. For now, that is attached to the correct CRAM, but if this was pulled in and out of play, it might decide to be attached to that CRAM instead. Gauge increases and connectors can only be attached to one CRAM system at a time, and they will arbitrarily pick one and absolutely ruin your day, which is embarrassing. Okay, so yeah, like what did I miss here? So you can have material efficiency and you can have redundancy with multiple firing pieces, at the expense that it's two weaker shells rather than one strong one, which is generally better at punching through active defenses, because if nothing else, area of effect active defenses, like flak, like missile interceptors, will hit both shells at once and effectively do twice as much damage. But there's ways around that with staggered fire and all that stuff. We'll talk about that more in the optimization video that will follow this. And so, here's our 2D Tetris, by the way, you probably noticed. And we can look in there, this is standard 2D, it is the pancake, just multiple stacked pancakes, and the stat screen is on the top here. So the gauge, 2000 millimeters, the HE damage is roughly 60,000, reload speed is different for each CRAM cannon, because unfortunately, sometimes it's just weird like that, because, like, pellets are effectively only owned by one CRAM system at a time, which is why the material cost is also weird. So, if you go into the stat screen, this CRAM system says that it is 12,200 materials. But this one says it's over 20,000 materials. This is because this one is owning all the pellets. So that's a little bit confusing. So if you have more than one CRAM system sharing pellets, if you want to calculate the efficiency of it, you kind of have to take the average of the two things. Because it'll skew too far one way or the other. And, yeah, so the material for firepower of this is roughly just over 400, which is acceptable, not great. That is 2D Tetris. Properly done 2D Tetris in a nutshell is generally acceptable but not great. But the volume efficiency is very good. It is just over 8 volume per firepower, which is very nice, as I've typed there. So 2D is still kind of the best volume efficiency I've seen in CRAM cannons. It's just bloody expensive. So you see here, the material cost of these two CRAM systems sharing pellets is over 32,000. Now, compare that to this thing. Well, actually not this thing. This is where the rotational Tetris stops being useful. It's pretty much only good for a 3x3 system to stick as many CRAM bits in there as possible, as much CRAM connections. I have tried to make this work on a larger scale, and it just kind of fails miserably. So, if we shrink the blocks, you'll see in there, we've got the same kind of thing we had before. We have that weird cross, and then it goes up a little bit, and there's the weird cross again. And this particular one, by the way, this is a 5x5 connector. It needs this so that that these two separate CRAM cannons don't mix up their connections a little bit. So, just like gauge increases, it is worth bearing in mind now that you can do funky things with connectors as well to make sure that your CRAM bits are connected to the right CRAM cannon. Might take a little bit of fiddling around, but it is generally worth it. Now, problems with this. You'll see there's a whole bunch of pellets right next to each other, and even right next to packers, which are not connected. This is where this rotational Tetris kind of falls out, because this thing prioritizes making as many 4 connections with pellets as possible, which 2D Tetris does anyway once it's on a scale larger than 3x3. So let's look at the stats here. As the pattern gets bigger, it gets less and less efficient when compared to even 2D Tetris. This particular turret is still an improvement on the 2D version, but barely justifies the extra complexity of building it. And note, it uses 5-way connections. There's a spelling mistake in there, which is unacceptable. Unacceptable. Also, bear in mind, I might have stuffed this one up, because I don't usually use rotational Tetris. What the hell did I nickname it? The berry loaf. In anything bigger than the 3x3 space. Anyway, so the HE damage per shell is actually a lot more. It's getting close to 80,000, as opposed to the 60,000 over here. Reload time is a little slower, but that's good for a CRAM cannon, because it means more shell health, and it means more damage per shot. It is more expensive. This setup is more expensive than the 2D one. Whoopsie daisy! This one is 32,850. This one is 32,967. Very slightly more expensive. And the material per firepower is a little bit better. It's only very slightly better than 2D Tetris, 414.45 versus 428.35. And the volume per firepower is 8.605. We have a problem here. It is exactly the same as 2D Tetris. Now, bearing in mind, as I said, I might have stuffed this one up. But this, on larger scales, is where the 6 and 5 connection Tetrises really come into their own. The bigger they get, the more efficient they get, because the more you save having to use extra pellets. So this is the 6 connection Tetris. This is big and cheap and beautiful. And this one is technically, the volume of it is smaller than the 3D Rotational and the 2D Tetris. Because it has gauges included in the Tetris itself. So you'll see here these alternating layers here have gauge increases stuck in there. You don't always have to do this. Some people like to stick other things in there, maybe extra pellets or stuff like that. This is just the way I do it. I've tried to do it differently and my brain just can't. So yeah, I like to stick gauge increases down there, like just where they fit, and that works fine for me. And zooming in here, you'll see that it is that lovely sandwich thing. We've got a layer of juicy bread, we've got a layer of juicy filling, but 6 connection Tetris, bread, filling, and then bread on top again, not to be confused with breadboard. Let's look at the stats for this. So, because of how this Tetris works, there's extra space that can be used to armor the turret better. Again, the problem with this is that, like, you kind of have to sandwich the filling layers, or the pellet layers rather, between these packer layers, or compactor layers, I guess I could call them, A and B, in order to like get the full efficiency out of them, which does limit what sizes they fit into comfortably, which is annoying. Which is why you'll probably see, actually, let's do this so you can see what I'm talking about. In the gaps here, there's just extra armor, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Because with any weapon system in From the Depths, it's not a matter of if your craft gets blown up, it's a matter of when your craft gets blown up. That is a problem. Okay, so let's look at the stats actually finally. Alright, so the HE damage per cell is just over 60,000, and that's because the reload time is actually slightly, it's even slower reloading than this one over here, and that might be too slow depending on what you want to do. And the problem with that is caused by the fact that there's entire layers which are just kind of filled with compactors, and that's just kind of the ball game, really. The shell health is over 10,000, so let's look here. The shell health is, this is better shell health, this is worse. Almost 12,000 on one of them. The material cost is 20,610, which is way cheaper than this guy here, which is 32,000, almost 33,000. So this is where 6 connection again really comes into its own. It's cheaper, which means you can have more turrets, which means more redundancy, which means you can get blown up a lot and still blow the other guy up. Very nice. The volume per firepower is worse. So it's like, yeah, not significant. I spelled that wrong again. But not significantly enough to offset the cost of it. This is why you don't make tutorial fortresses late at night, folks. 10.52 versus 8.605. So this is quite a bit worse in terms of volume efficiency, but again, you have a much cheaper CRAM cannon overall, and that difference only escalates the bigger you get. These are not as big as CRAMs get. Now, as for the 5x5, the double filling, as you can see here, this is the basic filling of the filling. So we've got here, we've got a layer of delicious bread, we've got a delicious meaty layer there, and another delicious layer there, and another layer like that. Let's have a look at this fella. So, the double filling sandwich 5 connection version with all associated benefits. So the HE damage, again, over 60,000, reload time is just over 20, and this has probably the best shell health out of any of these, and I don't know how I managed it, but these two guns have almost exactly the same stats except for reload time. I don't know how I did that. The material cost is a little bit more pricey than the 6 connection. This is over 26,000, whereas this is only 20,000. But well, not really, but the material per firepower is 379, as opposed to the 352.45. So this, at roughly this size, is where it finally loses out to the 6-connection Tetris in terms of material efficiency. This is because, like I said, 6 connections is more efficient at larger sizes, or at least more material efficient, than 5-connection Tetris. And the volume per firepower is 9.455, which is not as good as 2D, but better than 6 connections. So again, let's have a look here. So that's just looking over here. Reload time is about roughly 21 seconds and 65,000 HP damage. So yeah, it fires more quickly with a more damaging shell, and the shell has more health. So in terms of density, yes, this is better. But in terms of material efficiency, this is better. Now that we've gone over every damn kind of Tetris, it's time to build some. So you can follow along at home, hopefully, and hopefully this won't take too long. So, let's destroy all that. Apologies for how long this video is, that's kind of the ball game and From the Depths. So we're going to start off with some 2D Tetris, or at least 2D Tetris on a scale that is useful. So we're going to go here, one-axis turret, we're going to get our local weapon controller, and handy thing to do with the local weapon controller is set limits on all of this. In this particular case, CRAM cannons suck at shooting things below the waterline, and engage vehicles below something detection area. So we want to set this maximum below engage vehicles. Right, so this basically prevents your CRAM cannon from firing too soon, which is very handy. This is actually getting into the optimization of things, but that's okay. So we want a 5x5 CRAM turret here. So we're going to start off with this, and then we're going to have a lovely ring of packers around it, like so. And then we're going to have 2 more of them, and we're going to have connectors on the sides here, like so. And then a few more packers to have that lovely 4-connection Tetris. And we're going to make this thing as big as we want it. Let's make it, let's make it a 4 meters tall. Actually, let's make it 5 meters tall, so it's exactly 5 by 5 by 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we're going to connect up all these things, and we're going to do a little bit of 3D Tetris right at the top, because that is handy, and I like to do that. And we're going to stick gauge increases right there, and we're going to give this thing a little bit of a neck, just a tiny little bit of a neck. The turrets I showed earlier are necklace turrets. That's a whole different tutorial in itself. And let's do an elevation barrel. Actually, we can be lazy here. There's no functional difference between all these. 1, 2, 3, 4. Maximum elevation. Motor different barrel. Actually, let's put a flash suppression barrel on here as well. So, just to show you, 475 meters detection range. And now it's half that, 238 meters detection range. So, now we've got that. A few motor driven barrels as well. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then as many barrels as it takes to get it. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And 1, 2, 3, 4, just for good luck. And right at the tip of the barrel is where this thing's most likely to get hit. So I like to stick some heavy barrels right on the very tip. Sometimes further along the length, depending on how the CRAM barrel is. And what's the reload time? It is 7.47 seconds. We can add a lot more gauges to this. We also need a fuse box. So let's do this, and this is pure HE, so I'm just going to stick an inertial fuse on it. I'm going to make that slightly more generous, like there, and 1, 2, just going to have enough gauge increases. These things are pretty tough, by the way, so you can stick them up in the turret cap if you have to. Probably better to stick them down below decks, because your CRAM cannon will get worse if it loses too many gauge increases. Okay, so it's like, it's about 11 seconds. And how much explosive damage? Actually plenty. That does 17,000 explosive damage. Very nice. Okay, and just checking that we've done this, I'm actually going to copy-paste. Rotate when reloading is purely aesthetic, but at the very least, you do want to set the weapon group if you're going to use them, and required accuracy. This is important. I've seen so many people stuff that up. And just going to do that, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that. Paste a lot of stuff on the clipboard. And there we have a 2D Tetris CRAM cannon. Or at least a very quick one. So, 5x5 is, I would suggest, the minimum size you start using 2D Tetris, because 3x3 is bad. For 3x3, you're much better off using the rotational Tetris we talked about before. So we're going to have this guy again, and we're going to have that all in one local weapon controller, and copy-paste. Copy-paste is very good. It's literally Control-C and Control-V, by the way. Alright, so that rotational Tetris. We're going to build it from scratch. Or at least we're going to build it 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and now here's the fun bit. It's still Diamond Tetris. It's all diamonds all the way down. So all facing in like so, and then the diamond points up like that, always pointing in directions that we want. And we're going to make it roughly the same size as this one, so we can, I don't know, just for aesthetic purposes. And once we've got that, we can, just double checking that all the things are correct. Okay, so now, Control P for prefab, and 3x3, and remember it is 1, 2, rotate, and 1, 2, rotate. If I've done that correctly, it should have a nice little cross section there. That's actually the correct height as well. Perfect. So we're going to have that as well, and there, and I'm actually going to prefab the barrel as well, because, like, that's a good barrel. We've made a good barrel here, and just, it's really helpful just to prefab everything you can, because it saves so much time, and I'm a fan of saving time. Alrighty-ho then. So, this has a reload speed of 6 seconds. That's possibly too quick. So, I'm going to be cheeky, make this a necklace turret. And we're going to do that, and we're going to do that, and we're just going to add that fusing box. Whoops, I didn't copy the fusing box. Now I did. So now we got to really pile on the gauge increases, which kind of double as armor. How's that, 11 seconds? Yeah, at minimum a roughly 10 seconds reload is probably a good idea. That does less damage, but ye gods, this is a smaller, and let's see here. What's the cost of this? That is about just over like 5,500, and this is over 8,000. So already much more efficient Tetris right here. Now we're going to do some 6-connection Tetris because that's fun and we like that. This is going to be, well, I'm actually going to pinch over here this layer because that's a good idea. I've already built this. Why not reuse it? Doop, doop. So same deal here. I could actually reuse that whole turret if I wanted to, but I'm not going to. For demonstration purposes. So here we got our turret. I'm going to go Control V. Everything is still on the clipboard. Everything is still on the clipboard, and we're going to do something interesting here. This is not going to be our bottom layer. This is not going to be sandwiched correctly if we do that. So Control Z. I'm going to hit backspace. Turn off connection rules. This is now going to be our second layer from the bottom. And now we're going to do some Tetris. Let's do Tetris. Let's do it. And now I arrange things from the rear, making sure that we've got a pointy peg pointing both up and down. And we're going to do that. And that's good. And then we're going to fill this with compactors. And what do we have here? I think if we are clever, we can do this. If we do that, since they're not pointed in any particular direction anyway, we can maximize connections a little bit. It means that this can have 3 connections at the very minimum. We'll see how we go. We'll see. We might have to tweak things a little bit in order to get what we want. So let's go there, let's go there. That's a lot of delicious compactors. Okay, and now we can prefab this layer here. Take it like so, put it down there, and just double check that everything is connected. Here is where I like to just quickly check to see if I've done this right. I've done this so many times, but it's very easy to stuff up. And this is where it's a good idea to turn this on. Warning highlights, build mode only. We appear to be Gucci. Do we have 6 connections? Here. That is 2 connections, that is 2 connections. We'll see if we can't squish some 3 connections in there. Right, I'm going to turn this off now, because it's very annoying, and I don't like it. Right, now, we can prefab 2 layers. So like so, 1, 2, and 1, 2. So a little bit taller than the other ones, and now we can connect all these connectors like so. I'm going to stick a firing piece here at the same height, just stick it back here. What do we got here? Oh, that's perfect. We've got a reload time of such and such. Right, so let's see here. If we are cute and clever, we can add even more connections going in here. Like so. This payload packer is actually good. So now, if we really want to be clever, and generally you'd want to stick hardener pellets in here just for giggles, but we're crazy. So that now has 3 connections there. That is acceptable, but not great. But the rest of this thing is more than acceptable. And again, let's do that, and let's do that, and let's do that. So 2 connections over there. This has a reload speed of just under 10 seconds, which means we can go nuts on the gauge increases a little bit. And let's see if we can't get it. Yeah, that's all we need. 1,100 meters, a whopping 22,000 explosive damage, and we're gonna prefab. Actually, you know what I should do here? I should prefab this whole barrel. Like so. Prefab the barrel. Prefab the barrel. Prefab the barrel. Prefab the barrel. It's good for you, I say. Alrighty, so what we got here? So, let's check the material cost of this. That is just over 7,000. This is just over 5,000. That's just over 8,000. So we are saving 8,000 materials, probably a bit more, by using this thing. And now, over here, we are basically going to duplicate this entire turret and then do weird things with it. Or rather, we're going to prefab these 2 layers here. Actually, save this barrel over here because I want to use it later. If you better get used to prefabbing if you want to build CRAM cannons, because ye gods, you're going to be doing it a lot. Right, so I'm going to save that as a placeholder. Always have placeholder slots for your prefabs as well. It's a good idea. So then I'm going to be super cheeky. Control-0, sub-object, save this as a placeholder. Put the whole damn thing over here. And then I'm going to do this, and I'm going to delete a whole bunch of layers. What? Ow. That's what happened. There's also a fun trick you can do with CRAM cannons, or any block really. Shift-delete deletes an entire system all at once. So if you go here, this is all connected. Shift-delete, it's all gone. And over here, same thing. Shift-delete, all gone. Here, Shift-delete, all gone. Here, Shift-delete, all gone. Now we have a mysterious, spooky, floaty thing. Now, we can go back to where we saved our Tetris. Let's see here. That is correct. And now, we can do the other Tetris here. 1, 2, exactly the same layers I just built. Go back to the first one. 1, and then filling, and then bread, and then filling. And then we can connect all this up like... How should we connect this? We should connect it like so. Maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe we should. Nope, we shouldn't do that. So now we can connect all these things up like this. This height might be a little bit disadvantageous for this. So that's just over 12 seconds. That's about 10 seconds, 16,000 explosive damage. We can do more connectory things in here. Lovely, 5 connections in there. Jolly good, jolly good. We like to see it. We like to see that. We like to see that. You've got also a this I forgot to mention as well. 3D Tetris is also kind of more resilient than 2D Tetris to being shot at, because you've got redundant connectors in there. Makes it harder for any one shot to cripple the whole damn CRAM cannon, which is very nice. I've seen that multiple times. It's jolly good. Oh, hell yeah, we can stick extra pellets up here. How exciting. How exciting, I say. Alright. More of that, more of that. Yeah, we've got 10 seconds. We don't need gauge increases if we don't want to. We can definitely do that if we do want to. Just for giggles, let's have the same gauge as that. So we've got reload time of just over 12 seconds. And reload time, there's a slightly faster reload time. What is this? 22,000. 22,000. Let's have a look here. The stats are... Yep, it's about 7.6 thousand materials as opposed to... Oh, this is actually cheaper. Interesting. Why is that? What's happened here? Why is this more expensive? Interesting. I'm not sure how that's happened. CRAM Tetris is weird. At this scale, I do have to say, this 5-connection Tetris is better. Let's see here. So the material efficiency is 415. This one is 402. So weirdly enough, this one is more expensive, somehow. But also has better material efficiency. So that makes sense. Volume per firepower is 10.2, and this one is 10.68. How the hell did I... See what I mean? These stats are misleading. So, yep, this is cheaper than that somehow. I don't know how it did that. Possibly it's got something to do with these extra pellets over here. Let's remove those. Let's see if we can't... do something like this. Get rid of these 3 connection things. That is, reload time is about 20 seconds now. And do the same thing over here. Just for giggles, replace all the 3 connections with something else. Let's see here. What is that? That is just under 7,000. And this is now way cheaper. There we go. If you mix the kind of connections you're dealing with, yeah, that's going to be a bit of a problem. Alright, this thing fires more slowly, but it does more damage, and it has higher shell health. Honestly, both of these are pretty good. This one does appear to be more dense, as would be expected. This one's more material efficient. It's time to let these CRAM cannons shoot something. Marauder, we need you. Yes, just under an hour. So again, sorry for this video being so damn long, but that's From the Depths for you. So if you have any questions, do ask in the comments below, even if I don't get around to answering it. Like, there's cool people who generally would, so that's good. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed, I hope you learned something, I hope that was helpful. CRAM Cannon Tutorial 103 will be coming soon-ish, probably. That's going to be optimization, and that's going to be another long one, unfortunately, because there's a lot of ways to optimize a CRAM cannon. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Support me on Patreon, or YouTube membership if you like. It really helps. And there's fun perks in it for you. Like at the lowest tier of the Patreon, access to a Patreon-exclusive Discord where you can hang out with me and other cool people. And do check out my other channels. I have another gaming channel, and I have an art stream channel, and I have another video game streaming channel. I've got too many. I apologize. Except I'm not sorry. I love it. And by the way, check me out on Twitch. We stream From the Depths twice a week, and not From the Depths twice a week. Would love to see you there. So, I will see you next time in From the Depths. CRAM Cannon Tutorials, updated for 2025. Farewell!